Overthinking is not a fixed part of your identity. It's not some unchangeable trait you were born with, and it certainly isn't a curse you're doomed to carry. Overthinking is a habit, a mental habit. And like any habit, it was learned, and anything that's been learned can be unlearned. Most people live their lives completely unaware of this. They think that because they've always done something, it must be who they are. But that's not how the mind works. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who is aware of them. And once you start to understand that difference, everything begins to change. The truth is, overthinking is simply the result of mental conditioning. Somewhere along the way, you were trained to believe that thinking more equaled better results. That if you just considered something from every angle, if you worried about every possible outcome, if you rehearsed every conversation in your mind, you could somehow control the future. But that's not how life works. In fact, overthinking doesn't give you more control. It gives you less. It traps you in a loop of indecision, of second guessing, of analyzing situations until all the clarity you once had is gone. Your subconscious mind operates on repetition. It doesn't distinguish between what serves you and what harms you. It just installs whatever you feed it consistently. If you overthink often enough, your mind begins to automate that behavior. You begin to overanalyze everything, your relationships, your choices, your goals, your past, your future. And what began as a cautious thought becomes a compulsive pattern. But understand this, a pattern is not permanent. A pattern can be interrupted. It can be rewritten. And the first step in doing that is awareness. You cannot change what you're not aware of. So start to observe yourself, catch yourself in the act. When your thoughts begin to spiral, don't follow them blindly. Pause. Pay attention to the loop that's playing. You'll notice it's always the same thoughts, the same doubts, the same what-ifs. The mind doesn't get creative with worry. It recycles the same old narratives. The next thing you must understand is this. Thought is movement. Thought is energy. Every time you think a thought, you're sending a frequency out into the world. And that frequency either aligns with what you want or it doesn't. When you overthink, you are focusing on problems. You are focusing on fear. You are focusing on lack, on confusion, on doubt. And because of that, you're sending out a frequency that draws more of the same into your experience. This isn't mystical. It's mechanical. The subconscious mind is a goal-striving mechanism. It seeks to prove true whatever image you feed it. So if you're constantly playing out worst-case scenarios in your mind, your subconscious goes to work manifesting them. Not because it's cruel, but because you've programmed it to do that. This is how powerful your mind is. And this is why overthinking is so dangerous. You're not just stressing yourself out. You're actively sabotaging your own progress. People think the answer to overthinking is to just stop thinking. That's not realistic. You were born to think. Your mind is a tool. But it's a tool meant to be directed, not left to run wild. The solution isn't to stop thinking. It's to start thinking with intention. You've got to learn how to give your mind a clear direction. When the mind doesn't have a job to do, it makes one up. And most of the time, that job is worry, fear, doubt. But when you give your mind a target, when you decide what you want, and begin to focus your thoughts on that, the entire energy of your thinking shifts. You begin to see options where before you only saw obstacles. You begin to feel momentum where before you only felt hesitation. Overthinking comes from not making a decision. It's the result of hesitation. When you stand between two choices for too long, your mind fills the gap with questions. What if I pick the wrong one? What if this doesn't work? What if I fail? But the mind is only doing what it's trying to do. It's trying to protect you. It doesn't want you to be hurt. So it tries to think everything through until there's no risk. But there's no such thing as risk-free progress. You grow by moving, not by analyzing. Overthinking is mental clutter. It's a sign that you are not directing your energy. Imagine a hose with water spraying everywhere. That's what your mind looks like when you're overthinking. It's unfocused, chaotic, and ineffective. But when you take that same energy and focus it on a single point, on one clear decision, one goal, one intention, it becomes powerful, it becomes productive. You're no longer wasting energy, you're channeling it. This is what separates people who achieve from those who hesitate. The achievers are not necessarily smarter. They just don't overthink. They make a decision, they act. And if it doesn't work, they adjust. But they don't sit in the same place for days, weeks, or years trying to think their way into certainty. Certainty is a byproduct of action. It doesn't come before the decision. It comes after. To stop overthinking, you must begin to trust yourself. That's the real issue here. It's not about how much you think. It's about why you think so much. And more often than not, it's because you don't trust yourself to handle what happens next. But let me tell you something, you've already survived everything life has thrown at you so far. You're still here. You're stronger than you think. You've just forgotten that. And overthinking is how that forgetting shows up. You don't need more information. You don't need more reassurance. You need more time. You need to decide. Even if the decision isn't perfect, it gets you moving. And momentum kills overthinking. It disrupts the loop. That's what you want to do. Break the loop. Every time your mind starts to spin, move. Get up, write something, take an action, speak, decide. Train your mind to associate overthinking with movement, not stagnation. Because the more you sit with it, the stronger it becomes. And here's something else, see, overthinking doesn't live in the present. It's either stuck in the past, rehashing old mistakes, or stuck in the future, trying to predict outcomes but your power is in the now, not in the next hour, not in the next year now. The more you can bring your attention to what's in front of you, the more you begin to reclaim that power. Focus on what you can do right now. That grounds you, it centers your mind, it gives your thoughts a job. Most people walk around with their mind running them instead of the other way around. But the mind is a servant, not a master. It's there to work for you. So you've got to teach it how to think in ways that serve you. That means cutting off the thought patterns that lead to nowhere. That means being ruthless about what thoughts you entertain. That means developing a mindset of decision, action, and belief, not doubt, delay, and fear. Overthinking may be a habit, but so is clarity, so is confidence, so is progress. You just haven't practiced them enough yet. You see, overthinking always disguises itself as logic. It wears the mask of caution. It sounds like reason, but it's not reason. It's resistance. It's your old conditioning trying to keep you small. It wants you to stay where it's safe, where it's familiar. But safety is an illusion when it costs you your peace, your power, your progress. Growth begins where overthinking ends. And the only way to end it is to interrupt it again and again until your mind learns a new way to operate. That repetition, that deliberate conditioning is how transformation happens. It's not about force. It's about awareness and then consistent direction. You become what you think about. That's not just a motivational phrase. It's a fundamental law of the mind. Whatever you continuously hold in your thoughts, you begin to attract, to move toward, to become. The thoughts you think over and over again form your self-image, your emotional state, your choices, and eventually your reality. But here's the problem. Most people spend the majority of their time thinking about what they don't want. They're constantly focused on what could go wrong, what might fail, what others might think. They obsess over doubts, fears, and problems. And because of that, they end up creating more of the very thing they're trying to avoid. This is where overthinking becomes truly dangerous. It's not harmless noise. It's not just a mental habit. It's a creative force gone in the wrong direction. The mind is always working. It's always creating, always processing, always manifesting. But the direction it moves in is entirely based on your focus. And overthinking, by its very nature, is rooted in negative focus. It's a constant repetition of questions like, what if it doesn't work? What if I make the wrong decision? What if I'm not enough? These are not neutral questions. They are charged with doubt. And doubt is a repelling force. It pushes away clarity, confidence, and progress. Most people don't realize how powerful their attention is. Wherever your attention goes, your energy flows. And whatever you give energy to grows. When you constantly feed fear, fear expands. When you focus on what's lacking, the sense of lack grows. And when you dwell on all the ways something might go wrong, your mind begins to find evidence to support those thoughts. It's not that the world becomes more dangerous. It's that your perception shifts. You start to see through a lens of fear. You notice only the obstacles. You overlook the opportunities. You miss the very signs that could help you move forward because you're too caught up in the noise of your own mind. This is why it's critical to understand that thought is not just mental activity. It's a directive. Every dominant thought you hold is an instruction to your subconscious mind. The subconscious doesn't argue, it doesn't question. It accepts. It simply takes the picture you give it and begins to move you. bit by bit, toward its fulfillment. That means if you're constantly thinking about how anxious you feel, how uncertain things are, how likely it is that you'll fail, your subconscious doesn't try to fix that. It begins to align your habits, emotions, and even your perception of reality to match that picture. So when you overthink, especially about problems, you are not preparing, you are programming pain. You're not avoiding, you're inviting more of it into your life. And the longer you stay in that state of mental overload, the deeper the pattern becomes. Thought repeated becomes belief, belief repeated becomes identity. And once something becomes part of your identity, you begin to live it out without even realizing it. You don't just think the same thoughts. You start to become the version of yourself who expects things to go wrong, who believes they'll always struggle, who second guesses every choice. But just as this cycle can spiral downward, it can also spiral upward. That's the beauty of the mind. You can interrupt the pattern. You can change the image. You can take that same creative force and use it in the direction of what you do want. When you don't stop overthinking by force, you stop it by redirecting your focus. That's the key. You have to train yourself to think in alignment with the life you want to create, not the one you're afraid of. You have to start choosing thoughts that serve you, thoughts that reinforce your strength, your potential, your clarity, your decision. Because the truth is, all change begins in the mind, and that change starts with thought. When you deliberately choose to focus on a goal, a vision, or a possibility that excites you, your energy changes. You begin to generate emotion that supports action, enthusiasm, clarity. That emotional state is magnetic. It begins to pull ideas, people, opportunities into your awareness that you couldn't see before. Why? Because your perception has shifted. It's that moment when you've changed your internal frequency. You're no longer in the loop of hesitation. You're in the flow of movement. The mind is no longer trying to protect you. It's trying to move you. But this doesn't happen by accident. It happens by choice. And that choice has to be repeated. You must be willing to catch yourself when your thoughts drift back to fear. When your mind starts to run the old script of, what if it goes wrong? And instead of feeding that script, you replace it, not with fantasy, but with deliberate direction. You ask better questions. What if this actually works? What if I succeed faster than I expect? What would it look like if everything went right? These are not just feel-good thoughts. They are creative templates. You are literally laying down the mental blueprint for your reality to take shape. This is the real purpose of thinking, not to worry, not to stress, not to prepare for disaster, but to build. Your thoughts are tools. And if you use them with precision, they begin to construct a reality that reflects what you truly want. But if you let them run wild, undirected, rooted in fear and doubt, they build prisons instead of possibilities. Most people are trapped not by their circumstances, but by the thinking that created those circumstances. You must become intentional with your mental energy. That means developing the discipline to notice when you're spiraling into overthinking and choosing in that moment to think with purpose. This is not something you do once. This is a daily practice, a moment-by-moment awareness. And over time, it becomes your new habit. You begin to train your mind to expect the best, to look for solutions, to move toward growth. And the more you do this, the more your external world begins to reflect that shift. You also need to understand that the mind will always seek evidence for what it already believes. So if you're overthinking from a place of fear, your mind will dig up every past failure, every painful memory, every mistake, and use it to reinforce the fear. But if you shift your dominant thought pattern to belief, to faith in your ability, to trust in the process, the mind will begin to find new evidence. You'll start remembering moments of strength. You'll notice little wins. You'll recall the times you figured it out, and these memories feed a new belief that you can handle it, that you can choose, that you can act. It's not about eliminating every doubt forever. Doubts will come. Fear will visit. But what matters is what you do with them. Do you let them hijack your thinking? Or do you redirect your focus toward what matters? That's the difference between someone stuck in a loop and someone who moves forward. The one who moves forward isn't fearless. They're just more focused on what they want than what they fear. Your reality always begins in the mind. What you think about all day becomes the emotional tone of your life. It becomes the filter through which you experience people, opportunities, challenges. So train your mind to expect good. Train it to focus on potential. Train it to build, not break down. Because the moment you shift your dominant thought from fear to faith, from worry to decision, from confusion to clarity, the entire direction of your life begins to change. Not instantly, but inevitably. It's that moment when, because thought creates reality, and when you start thinking on purpose, you begin living on purpose.